Mm.
It's very difficult theory actually.
Yeah, true. We are still 38 participant, including us. So it's just about 36 students. I've taught everyone, but I have no idea if they are joining. My own class, we are 26 students, right, Rivos? Rivos?
Yes, sir.
Mm.
Hello.
Dr. Lian,
Yeah.
so Rivos is one of my students who are passionate to be a professional personal trainer. So, uh, yeah, I hope that today he can, like completely focus to listen the things that you are going to deliver and catch all of the things that as possible as you can.
Yeah, actually, I would like to invite you and maybe some of your younger like groups because
Mm-hmm.
my current university is not physical education. We
Mm.
have two bachelor degrees. One is Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science, and then the second bachelor degree is actually sports coaching.
Okay, so
So
it's
no
yeah,
physical education here.
it's
Yeah,
not PE.
no PE.
Yeah,
So
but then when people check your background, your educational background, you are actually sports scientist.
more than PE.
Yeah, but do not talk about it in front of my boss because she is she is more PE than sports scientist.
Yeah, I have a first degree in PE, but yeah, most of us move away after that and end up doing others. But I still go back to my roots. I'm still comfortable with PE. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I also do teaching methods.
Mm-hmm.
I was forced to, but well, after teaching a while, you get the hang of it.
Yeah.
So you should come. This uni now has got very good labs.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a diploma program. You know, if you have, do you have diploma there?
We don't have it. Last like couple 5 years ago, we did have it, but then they closed. So we only offering the bachelor, not diploma. But then this is kind of a paradox, doctor. So after they are graduating, if they want to work like to get more a decent salary, so they must do hand professional certifications,
Yeah.
and professional certification is actually can be earned only from the diploma program, right? So now we are trying to open new institutions about certifications, professional certification for sport employees. But we are still ongoing. So hopefully this year we can be what is it, accomplished by national accreditation from the Ministry of Youth and Sport. So wish us luck.
Yeah, good luck because yesterday, do you know Miriam, Dr. Miriam Ahmad? She's MSU, but MSU the main campus, not with Rebecca. She was
Mm-hmm.
our PhD student. I'm sure you met her earlier. Miriam Ahmad.
Me, well, probably yeah, I did, but yeah,
So
well,
yeah, so yesterday they organized a joint one with my new university,
mm-hmm,
and the topic I gave them was actually on coach education. Actually,
mm-hmm,
the model that I like to see how coaches develop. and
mm-hmm,
um, and it was interesting because I actually examined a few models from say England, New Zealand, the European countries,
mm-hmm,
and then of course I was looking at the Malaysian model,
mm-hmm,
and like you all, the Malaysian model currently is based in our Ministry of Youth and Sport, but it
mm-hmm,
carries no weight in terms of academic the programs.
mm-hmm.
So, like you say, we want them to. We're trying to move that line. So if I get something sorted out there, maybe we can discuss. Then you can see how you can do it for Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
I'm trying to benchmark with the American or the the overseas certifications. So
certificate. Yeah.
that, yeah, so we can see how we can come out with the bachelor degree, but but we
Yeah,
benchmark it against some professional certificates.
yeah. Well,
So if
I
I
do.
get through, if it's
Mhm.
successful there, I'll let you know how it's done.
Well, I think we should think about it. I mean, me and my colleagues here in Indonesia, because if we only get the national accreditation, then means they are only can use the certification in national level. But what you said, if we have branches in another countries, which is mean that our student can work in more
Overseas.
places, yeah, overseas, more opportunities.
And I tell you, trying to get through to our own people in government is harder than
Mm.
to get benchmark overseas. So that's
Mm.
why I'm benchmarking overseas.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Lian Yekok, so we now having about 54 participants, including us. Yeah. Should we
Okay,
move on?
let's go. Let's go.
Okay. So uh good afternoon, all my students. Probably this is we have Indonesian and Malaysian. Uh yep. Before we begin, let me introduce our honorable visiting virtually lecturer. I wish that one day, for sure, one day, Dr. Lian Yekok, she will be able to visit Semarang again and share knowledge about sports science or sport related topic with us someday for sure, because Dr. Lian Yekok, she is our old friend, you know, between Fakultas Ilmu Keolahragaan UNES Semarang and University Putra Malaysia, her former university. We are really good friend, and we are in the same circle, which called ACPES. So ACPES stand for ASEAN Council of Sport of Physical Education and Sport. And today, Dr. Lian Yekok, she is going to share knowledge about comparing effect and adaptations from aerobic and resistant training. And as you listened previously, that start from September this year, Dr. Kok is moving, she's not working for UPM anymore, but she's now working at the Department of Sports Science, Tunku Abdul Rahman University College, Malaysia. Well, she's really, really good on this field. The things that she's going to deliver to us today, because I ever moderate Dr. Lian personally at our faculty, and that was fruitful speech, right? So please turn on your camera before Dr. Lian begin, and do not forget to mute your microphone, because we don't want to hear any air pollution. So the delivering knowledge will be more clear for all of us. Without further ado, I am inviting our honorable visiting lecturer, Dr. Lian Yekok. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. I will now share screen. So I'm going to click here and just give me a moment while I sort everything out. Into just a moment. I got it here.
Yeah, no worry. Take your time.
Yes, it is taking a bit of time.
Yeah.
Do you have it now?
Uh, Still not have it. I don't know on the student screen. What about you, Rivos and others? On our screen, the I think your screen is still on the process. Maybe you can stop sharing and then reshare.
It's lagging.
Lagging.
Okay, I think I got bumped up for a while. Are you good with this now?
No, we don't see anything.
How about now?
No,
It
yeah,
is.
yeah. We have it.
Okay, how about if I turn it on? Uh,
Okay, Dr. Lian Ye, are you with us? Okay, I think Dr. Cook she left. This is technical issues, but please wait. Probably she's coming back for sure. Just wait a minute. Hello?
Hi, I got bumped up, so I'm trying again.
Yeah.
Just give me a little while to enter again. All right.
Yeah, sure. Don't worry because we are using unlimited Zoom, so should be fine.
I don't know why they keep telling me my password is wrong. Everything is wrong.
Do you use
So-
like IKORFIK 15?
15, right?
15, yeah.
Yeah. The passcode was incorrect. Oh, this is the passcode.
The passcode is IKO. I think, are you coming? Okay, a
I keep
moment.
getting bumped out. Okay, I'll try again. Don't know what's going on. My internet is fine. 183392. Okay, not IKORFIK
15. Yep.
Okay, here goes.
Does it work?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
A moment. So I need to make you as a co-host.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, sharing screen was a bit of a mess. Okay, I'll give it a go again. So shall I start again? Try again?
Yeah.
Okay, let's give it a go. Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
Hey,
Yeah, we can see it.
okay, let's try it again. Okay, how about that? All good?
It's freeze.
All good?
It's just a freeze screen. It's just the first slide. What about if I try share screen your PPT, Dr. Kok? You're still muting the microphone. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I think I keep going out whenever I share screen. Am I sharing? Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, let's give it a go. Okay, maybe I try the share screen again. And okay, is this sharing fine?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. How about this?
It's a lag again. It's a freeze. Should I open your PPT and try to share from my view?
Would you
What
do to be better?
what do you think? Maybe we need to try it, and then you can just next slide if I need to press this.
Yeah, let's give that a go and see, because it seems to freeze every time I go to that. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do it. You do it.
Can you see it? Does it work on your screen?
Nothing so far. Yes, I have it. All good there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to be having a discussion with you guys regarding um, this topic here, which is comparing effects and adaptations from aerobic and resistance training. My name is Lian. I'm with the Department of Sports Science, the Faculty of Applied Sciences, Tunku Abdul Rahman College, Tunku Abdul Rahman University College in Kuala Lumpur. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, I would like to start by saying that actually comparing aerobic and resistance training, it doesn't really matter what type of training. Any form of physical training requires an understanding of how the energy systems work. Now, energy systems and how they work is called bioenergetics. Now, the energy systems work together to produce ATP and how ATP is used during muscle contractions. So what I'm trying to say now is today's talk, I will try to explain to you that it doesn't really matter what type of training we do. No matter what, we basically need to understand how to produce ATP and then how the energy systems work together to produce it and in what way this type of training will endorse which energy system. So the focus of the talk today is, first of all, we're going to look at how muscles contract because we need muscles to contract in order for us to move. Now, then later, we'll try to examine how the energy for muscles contractions come from. Where does it come from? And then we're going to look at muscle fiber types and their recruitment. And then we're going to piece together the entire thing to see how it affects aerobic and resistance training. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, now, first of all, you need to have an understanding of muscles. The nervous system controls movement. In the nervous system, basically, we will be looking at the peripheral and the central nervous system. Now, under the peripheral system, now this peripheral system is divided by autonomic control and somatic control. The autonomic control controls your cardiac muscles and your smooth muscles. They are done involuntarily. You can't do anything about it. It will carry on with or without you. I'm hoping with you, but it carries on. We can't control this type of muscles. So cardiac muscles and smooth muscles under the autonomic control system, we cannot control this. It is involuntary. Now, what we can control under the somatic peripheral system are skeletal muscles. When we move using skeletal muscles. So skeletal muscles are what we call voluntary. We can control them to a certain extent, all right? Technically, we can control them, but our brain controls them so well that sometimes we don't realize that we do movement so quickly, we don't really realize the control that we have. And you have over 600 muscles in your body. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, now we're going to have a quick look at skeletal muscles. So skeletal muscle anatomy would be, first of all, we would look at this diagram on the right, and most of your muscle bundles will come and look like this. But if you pull it down to just one muscle fiber, you're going to see that within that muscle fiber, you will have this layer. This layer is called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, the layer in yellow. And then, other than this very important sarcoplasmic reticulum, you're also going to have mitochondria. Now, this mitochondria here, I want you to take note because later we're going to come back to this about how important it is for the formation of many, many ATP. All right, next slide, please. Now, when we take out one muscle fiber, basically, if you look at this picture down here of a person doing a squat, this is actually one of the thigh muscles. From the thigh muscle fiber, and we pull it out, you're going to have a look at the general picture of one fiber like this, and you're going to look at all the different parts of the muscles, which you will learn in your anatomy and physiology class. And what you're going to have is that basically the most important parts for me for the muscle fiber that you need to understand are the myosin filaments, which are the thick ones down here in red, which have little heads, the myosin heads, and the thinner muscle filament, which we call the actin filaments. Now, these two basically are important protein fibers. The protein elements down here are those filaments that work together. When they get closer together, if you look at this, they can get closer together. You are actually looking at what we call a muscle contraction. When your muscle contracts, the myosin head and the actin, they will sort of link up and pull each other together. So you will see a muscle contraction happen here. Next slide, please. So how do we move? We move when the brain sends a message to the nervous system to your muscles. The muscles then shorten or contract, and they will pull the bone, one bone to another, and this will help you create movement. Muscles pull on tendons and joints, and they will pull on bones to help you accomplish movement. While movement is taking place, receptors are cells that receive stimulus from around you. They will give feedback regarding how fast your muscles are contracting, what direction is contracting, and what's the force of the movement. All this in turn is given back via nerves to your spinal cord, back to the brain, and it allows the brain to adjust how you want to move. This is how humans move. Next slide. So when you have this stimulus going to your brain about how you need to move, so if you look on the right, let's start from the right. The brain receives the signal, and the signal goes to the muscle. So if you look at this muscle motor unit down here. A motor unit is the neuron that links to many muscle fibers. One motor neuron will lead to a number of muscle fibers depending on the type of fiber. All right. So you have the motor neuron now here on the left. When the signal reaches one fiber, what happens is this signal will release a certain type of a chemical, and this chemical, acetylcholine, actually will then release other types of signaling devices into this area here, which is now actually part of the yellow section of the muscle fiber I was telling you about, the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So when the acetylcholine here gets signal, it goes over here. What it does is it will release calcium through the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Thank you. Next slide. Now, actually, I would like to let you watch a video. I'm not sure. I've given you the link down here. How good are you and able to run that video off YouTube, you think, Dr. Arif? Are you able to do that? Can we watch a video?
Yeah, we can do it. So a moment.
Yeah, let's take a little while. So try to digest what I said to you while Dr. Ali is trying to look for that video for me on YouTube. So what we are having is trying to tell you how signaling from the brain moves down to your central nervous system and to your peripheral system, and those signals go down to your muscles. And then when you receive those signals, your muscles will contract. So this video gives a good representation, and hopefully it will clarify exactly what I was trying to tell you earlier. Because a video always makes it much easier to understand the physiology of movement. No worries, Dr. Ali. We have a lot of time, I believe.
We do. A moment, because I need to go to the Chrome and still logging. A moment.
Yeah. You could go on with the slides first while you're looking for that video. Would you like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
A while.
We could wait. It's okay.
And share screen again, right? A moment. So guys, the speed of talk from Dr. Koch, is it too fast for you or all right?
Yes, too fast.
Too fast?
Too fast.
Watch the video. I think then we should watch the video. The video will explain all the slides previously.
Yep, and make you easier to understand. And if you still get confused, you may ask. This said video unavailable, Dr. Koch.
Unavailable?
Unavailable. I copy the link that you provide on the PPT, but it says the video unavailable.
I hope I don't get kicked out again. I will see whether I can share screen again.
Or can what is the title of the video?
Yeah, just give me a moment. I will look for it. Just a moment, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called the muscle contraction process.
Muscle contractions process.
Do you want to try share screen again? Do we dare?
Yeah. Moment.
I am allowed to share screen, right?
Yeah. A moment. I'm trying to take you all to the YouTube here. Number
You have it?
one, can you see something on your screen?
Yes, but it's not that one. It's which? You go lower down. Let's see, a bit more maybe. It can't be that many. Because that one is quite good. Maybe further down some more.
Do you find something? No.
I think, just hang on. Could you go up, back again? Could you go up? Move back, forward.
The upper, yeah? Yeah.
No, further down again, sorry. I think there was one in the middle that I've used before. That's also possible. How about this one now? The one that's purple and red. Yeah, let's try that one and see.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try that one. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
A moment.
very good.
This
Yeah,
one?
that's the one. Yep.
You use muscles every day to do activities. This woman is using muscles to breathe, circulate blood, and move her hand to take notes. Your cardiac and smooth muscle tissues are involuntary. You do not consciously control their actions. Skeletal muscle works under voluntary control. Skeletal muscles are composed of bundles of muscle fibers. Muscle fibers are long cylindrical cells containing several nuclei. Muscles will contract or relax when they receive signals from the nervous system. A neuromuscular junction is the site of the signal exchange. This is where the synaptic bulb of an axon terminal and muscle fiber connect. Muscle fibers are composed of many myofibrils. A myofibril contains contractile units called sarcomeres. Sarcomeres run adjacent to one another down the length of the myofibril. Each sarcomere consists of alternating thick and thin protein filaments, giving skeletal muscle its striated appearance. The muscle contracts when these filaments slide past each other. The thick filaments are myosin, which are anchored at the center of the sarcomere, called the M line. The thin filaments are composed of the protein actin, which are anchored to the Z lines on the outer edges of the sarcomere. Because the actin filaments are anchored to the Z lines, the sarcomere shortens from both sides when actin filaments slide along the myosin filaments. Although the action between the filaments is described as sliding, the myosin filament actually pulls the actin along its length. The cross bridges of the myosin filaments attach to the actin filaments and exert force on them to move. This action is known as the sliding filament mechanism of muscle contraction. In this model, the sarcomeres shorten without the thick or thin filaments changing in length. A contraction begins when a bound ATP is hydrolyzed to ADP and inorganic phosphate. This causes the myosin head to extend and can attach to a binding site on actin, forming a cross bridge. An action called the power stroke is triggered, allowing myosin to pull the actin filament toward the M line, thereby shortening the sarcomere. ADP and inorganic phosphate are released during the power stroke. The myosin remains attached to actin until a new molecule of ATP binds, freeing the myosin to either go through another cycle of binding and more contraction or remain unattached to allow the muscle to relax. Muscle contractions are controlled by the actions of calcium. The thin actin filaments are associated with regulatory proteins called troponin and tropomyosin. When a muscle is relaxed, tropomyosin blocks the cross-bridge binding sites on actin. When calcium ion levels are high enough and ATP is present, calcium ions bind to the troponin, which displaces tropomyosin, exposing the myosin binding sites on actin. This allows myosin to attach to a binding site on actin, forming a cross bridge. Calcium ions are stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum and are released in response to signals from the nervous system to contract. Neurotransmitter molecules are released from a neuron and bind to receptors, which depolarizes the membrane of the muscle fiber. The electrical impulse travels down the T-tubules and opens calcium stores. Calcium ions flow to the myofibrils, where they trigger a muscle contraction. As the actin and myosin slide along each other, the entire sarcomere shortens as the Z lines draw closer to the M line. As the sarcomeres in myofibrils contract, the entire muscle fiber will shorten. When muscle fibers contract in unison, a muscle can produce enough force to move the body, allowing you to take notes.
Okay, that's the end of the video. Thank you. Okay, now we can go back to the slide.
To the slide. Yeah.
Okay, I hope the video has helped to make the slides for this easier to understand. This part of the process, you should actually learn more about this during exercise physiology. Okay, what I want you to remember from the video is the part about ATP. So if you are watching and understanding that muscles shorten and contract because ATP was attached to the myosin, and so that myosin could reach forward and pull on the actin. So this is how, with ATP causes the muscles to contract. Okay, next slide, please. So if you looked at the video, it gives you a clear understanding of when muscles contract, you need ATP. So to move the body during any movement, any physical activity, any exercise, any sport, your muscle fibers must contract. They must shorten. How fast? How many muscle fibers contract depend on how much energy you have inside those muscles. We have energy that's stored inside each muscle fiber. Now, where does this energy come from? This energy comes from your food, your drinks, and it determines how much this energy is stored and transferred during movement so that you can move properly and for a long time. So what is this fuel? This fuel is not directly from the food you take. This fuel is what we call ATP. Next slide, please. You saw ATP in the video. You saw ATP. This ATP moves around in your muscles. They come from food, but eventually they move around in muscle. You need to tap one more time, please. The video is not complete. Sorry, your slide. Can you tap one more? There's another part to the slide. Yeah, some more, please. The writing. Yeah, thank you. More of this, please. More. Thank you. Yes. Now, so ATP looks like, sorry, too much. Can you go back? Thank you. So what is ATP? You saw it in the video. ATP attaches to myosin. When it splits up, ATP splits up into ADP and phosphate, energy is released. So this energy allows the myosin head to move up to the actin and they pull each other together, your muscles contract. So ATP is needed to help your muscles contract because when muscles contract, you can move. So the basic unit of energy inside your body is called ATP. No matter what you're doing, even now, when you're sitting down, listening to me, the moment you move one finger, the moment you move your arm or your leg a little bit, we have used ATP. Now, we are always using ATP, even when we are sitting down like this. And ATP is stored inside your muscle, but there's not a lot of it. So when we move a little bit, we have used ATP. What happens then? So we must rebuild, because ATP, to give us energy, breaks down into ADP and phosphate. So ADP and phosphate is happily swimming around inside the muscles, inside the fluid in our body. So what we must do is to build again. We call it resynthesize. We must build ATP again so that we can keep having energy for a long period of time. Okay? So don't worry too much about the earlier slides, because the earlier slides is much easier to understand from the video. So what I need you to understand from the video, especially, is the part where ATP is attached to myosin. And when ATP attaches to myosin, it is broken down to release energy. That is how myosin will capture actin, and that will cause your muscles to contract. The moment your muscles contract, you have the ATP left behind, leaving behind ADP and phosphate, which must be joined again to make ATP. All right? This process keeps going on because our muscles cannot store a lot of ATP. Right? Next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yep, another half. Keep going. All right. Now, so my story so far is that ATP breaks up, and that allows your muscle to contract. When your muscles have contract, you have ADP and phosphate, P. So we need to resynthesize. We need to combine these together to give us ATP. In order to do that, we use 3 ATP producing systems. This 3 ATP resynthesis system is called, the first system is called ATP-PC. Your second system is the glycolysis, anaerobic glycolysis. And the third system is called oxidative phosphorylation. Now, they are very long sounding names, but these 3 systems will put together ADP and P to make it ATP again. So 3 systems. If you look at this picture tells you the same system. ATP-PC is called the creatine phosphate system, down on the right side. The second system here, glycolysis, is also called the anaerobic glycolysis system. And the third system, the oxidative phosphorylation system, down here, yes, thank you for your cursor, is also known as the aerobic system. Okay, so former names that you can find in some books will be, let's start again from the top. Creatine phosphate system is the ATP-PC system. The anaerobic glycolysis system is sometimes called the lactic acid system. And finally, the oxidative phosphorylation system is very commonly called the aerobic system. So these are the 3 ATP resynthesis systems. They all produce ATP. But how are they different? They differ in how quickly they produce ATP. Now, the quickest one is ATP-PC. You will use up ATP-PC very fast. After resting for about 3 to 5 minutes, it can produce ATP again, right? But ATP-PC system can only produce about 1 ATP. So like if you jump up, you have already used up that ATP. But if you rest a little while, that system is ready to produce ATP again, right? The ATP-PC system does not utilize oxygen. So three things there on how this energy system produces ATP. So the first system, ATP-PC system, produces ATP very quickly. The amount of ATP produced is only 1. Oxygen is not utilized, okay? Now the second system, the anaerobic glycolysis system, is slightly slower than ATP-PC. It needs a little time. It needs a few more process in the body before they produce ATP. Slightly slower than ATP-PC, but it's quite fast. The number of ATP produced, 2 to 4, not many, okay? Oxygen is also not utilized. So ATP-PC system and anaerobic glycolysis system are both what we call anaerobic systems. They do not use oxygen to reproduce, to resynthesize ATP, right? The third system, the oxidative phosphorylation system. They take a long time to produce ATP. They start producing after about 30 seconds after you start moving. They take about 30 seconds before they start producing ATP. And they fully produce ATP maybe starting 1 to 1.5 minutes after you start moving. But they produce many ATP. They can produce between 36 to 39 ATP. And definitely because they need oxygen, they utilize oxygen, it is called an aerobic energy producing system. Okay, so this is the first time I'm talking about it, don't worry. Next slide, please. We will look at the following slide. Yeah, so in this slide, you will see the first system, ATP-PC system. It is independent of oxygen. No oxygen required, okay? So it can keep producing ATP for about 15 seconds. So after that, you need to rest for a little while, and it's not long. After about 3 minutes, you get about 80%. You're 80% rested, it can start producing ATP, right? The second system, anaerobic glycolysis, is also independent of oxygen, right? It produces about 4 ATP, 2 to 4 ATP, depending on other people's calculation. However, yes, thank you for pointing there. The problem down here is it produces lactic acid. Okay. Now, if pyruvic acid combines with NADH and it manages to move into what we call the mitochondria, remember I showed you earlier the picture of the mitochondria, that is when it goes into the next system, the oxidative phosphorylation or the aerobic system. This system uses oxygen, but when it needs oxygen, it takes a while. There are many processes that they need to go through before oxygen can be utilized. And oxygen can be utilized only inside the mitochondria. That's why the mitochondria is really important for the aerobic system or the oxidative phosphorylation system. This system produces up to 36 or more ATP. Okay, so you don't need to really understand the exact mechanisms yet. That I'm sure Dr. Ali and his team down there will teach you more about this later. But you need to understand now that when we start moving, we need all 3 systems. But 2 systems give us ATP quickly, but not many ATP. The last system, the aerobic system, gives us more ATP. It allows us to do activity for a longer time, but unfortunately, it takes between 30 seconds to almost 2 minutes before it functions fully. In the meantime, we have to use the ATP-PC system and the anaerobic glycolysis system, which produces fewer ATP and also produces lactic acid. Okay, let's move forward to the next slide. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to emphasize again for you, showing when we use mitochondria. Okay, so the diagram on the left is anaerobic glycolysis, the lactic acid system. So when you start moving, you will get a few ATP from here. First, the ATP-PC system, but this is the anaerobic glycolysis system. So they produce ATP, but at the same time, they produce lactic acid, right? So if it moves into the mitochondria, you can see the lower part there, where it moves into the mitochondria. Now we move to the diagram on the right. The thing in red, the part in red, the very big part in red is the mitochondria. If it doesn't move into the mitochondria, it will produce lactic acid. So for a while, there will be some lactic acid. But the moment you move into the mitochondria, you have your Krebs cycle. And that will start going into then the electron transport system. And this is where the oxygen now comes into play. And by using oxygen, it produces H2O and releases carbon dioxide, which will be sent back to your system. Now, this system now is the aerobic system, uses oxygen, and you get a lot of ATP. So basically, I don't need you to understand many details, but I do need you to understand the difference between the anaerobic ATP producing system, which produces just a few ATP, but it doesn't use oxygen. Then you need to understand the aerobic system or the oxidative phosphorylation system. We call it the lembab system in Malay. It means that it's very slow, but the moment it starts moving, it allows you to produce many ATP. Thank you. So we'll go on to the next slide now. Okay, so the next slide now explains the system one by one. So ATP-PC system, it uses phosphocreatine. PC is phosphocreatine. It uses phosphocreatine molecule stored inside your muscle. So inside your muscle, you have two things that are needed by the anaerobic system. One is phosphocreatine. Phosphocreatine is used by the ATP-PC system. Number two, you have glycogen. Glycogen is utilized by your anaerobic glycolysis system. Okay. Now, so where does phosphocreatine come from? Phosphocreatine is found in food, in meat, in fish, and is produced in small amounts by your liver, your kidneys, and your pancreas. Your body has more phosphocreatine than ATP. Now, phosphocreatine quickly gives up one phosphate to combine with ADP. Remember, the moment you release energy, your ATP becomes ADP and phosphate. So phosphate found in the phosphocreatine molecule quickly combines with ADP to give you another ATP. Stored phosphocreatine lasts for about 10 seconds if you are performing at very high intensities. For instance, if you play volleyball, you jump up, you hit for a spike. That takes 2 to 3 seconds. Your body will probably use the ATP-PC system more. So you get up and you play golf. You hit the golf course, you hit the golf club once. That will also use ATP and it will be quickly recombined by the ATP-PC system. It generates ATP very quickly, but there's very few ATP. It quickly runs out. But the moment you rest, you will start replenishing PC again. 98% of PC can be recovered after 3 minutes of slow aerobic activities. All right, you can sit down and still recover, but it recovers quicker when you're using aerobic activity. The next system, anaerobic glycolysis or the lactic acid system. It takes a little bit longer to start because it has a few more complex reactions than the ATP-PC system. Body generates ATP from glucose, from glycogen actually, stored in active muscles and liver, in liver as glycogen. It gives you twice as much energy as from the ATP-PC system. Remember, ATP-PC system, every time it recombines, you probably get 1 ATP. But the anaerobic glycolysis system can give you between 2 to 4. Now, the moment you start intense exercise, please remember this word, intense exercise. Exercise that moves at a high intensity, it will start moving your ATP-PC system and your anaerobic glycolysis system as well. It is utilized, you will use anaerobic glycolysis until the oxygen system is available, until there is enough oxygen that moves into the mitochondria, so your aerobic system will start moving. And I told you just now, it does start, but it starts between 30 seconds to a minute after movement has started. Okay, next slide, please. Now, during high intensity exercise is in exercise where your heart rate beats quite quickly, right? During high intensity exercise, glycogen is broken down in the absence. That means glycogen is broken down into glucose without oxygen to form ATP, pyruvate, and hydrogen. If you keep going at high intensity, that means you move quickly and high intensity exercise continues, the pyruvate will combine with hydrogen to form lactic acid. You saw that in the diagram just now. So lactic acid, it makes your muscle more acidic. Your pH will decrease, making your muscle more acidic. When your muscle is acidic, the glycolysis system for resynthesis of ATP is difficult. It will make you more fatigued. So if you move at high intensity, so you have your glycolysis there trying to resynthesize ATP, but when they resynthesize ATP and pyruvate does not move into the mitochondria, it just stays there. It will combine with hydrogen to form lactic acid. So if high intensity exercise, you keep going, there will be more and more lactic acid. There will be more, it will be more acid in your muscles. It will cause fatigue. So if you move at very high intensity exercises, your peak power, you can only perform high power exercise tops 2 to 3 minutes and you will stop. Because the higher amount of lactic acid, you need this lactic acid to be cleared by your liver. So if you move at an intensity that's not so high, the liver can clear more lactic acid. The moment you move at very high intensities, the liver cannot produce so much lactic acid. So you have to reduce your intensity. At lower intensities, less lactic acid, the liver can clear it. So if you keep doing these two systems, there is not so much lactic acid and the liver can clear the lactic acid, you can keep moving. But the moment you move at higher and higher intensities, there is more lactic acid, the liver cannot clear it, you will reach what we call the lactic threshold. There will be too much lactic acid, you will fatigue, you will stop exercise, right? Next slide, please. So for the best performance, first of all, you need your muscles to have enough glycogen. So you have enough glycogen there, the glycolysis can actually produce ATP, right? So the other way is for you to do anaerobic training. When you do anaerobic training, that means training at a quite high intensity, but not beyond your threshold. your body can learn how to divert lactate and get your liver to clear it, or to use lactate and move it into the mitochondria so that it will be used by the oxidative system, right? So we're going to look at this process a bit later. Next slide, please. Okay, now, the oxidative phosphorylation or aerobic system. Now, this is the slowest contributor to ATP. I told you just now, it gives you many ATP, but it takes some time. It takes at least 30 seconds before before it can move into the mitochondria and the oxygen is there in the mitochondria. But it produces the most number of ATP, much more than the two anaerobic systems. So it's a major contributor when you are taking part in long duration activities, such as running, cycling, swimming, and doing it for a long time. Those are called your endurance events. But even when you're doing shorter events, you do have a contribution from the aerobic system, because the anaerobic system can only contribute so much. 55 to 65% of ATP during 800-meter running is coming from your aerobic system. The aerobic system can use two types of fuel. They can use carbohydrates, which is from your muscles, as glycogen, which will be broken down to glucose. The good thing about the aerobic system is slow going. It takes time, but it can use fat. There is fat that's stored as triglycerides. It's broken down into fatty acids, and these fatty acids will be moving around in your blood. So the aerobic system can use carbohydrates, which is also going around in your system. It's in your muscle. It is also moving around as blood glucose. It can also use fatty acids, which is also in your blood. So the amount of ATP from carbohydrate when oxygen is used is much higher, 36 to 39. Anaerobic glycolysis only gives you 4. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, well, many of us have a lot of fat stored in the body. And definitely, even if you don't have a lot, we always have more fat than more glycogen. There's always much more fat than glycogen in our body. Therefore, over time, those who take part in endurance training, when you use endurance training, you do a lot of running, a lot of swimming, a lot of cycling over a long time, you actually train your body to use more fat. When you train your body to use more fat, and you use fat more efficiently, you actually do not use so much glycogen. Because I think I need to tell you here is, when we use glycogen, that is when we will produce more lactate. We will produce lactate when we use glycogen. And lactate, you know, will combine with hydrogen to give you lactic acid. But if we train our body to use more fat, we spare the glycogen, there is less lactic acid produced. Okay? So if your muscles run out of glycogen, it will start taking glucose from the blood. The hormone glucagon will tell the liver then to break down the glycogen inside the liver to glucose and to release it to the blood. So if glucose levels in your blood, you see, if once it stops using what's in your muscle, it will start using the glucose in your blood. And if we keep going, the blood glucose becomes too low. Aerobic system can also use muscle protein. The muscle protein is broken down into amino acids, which is then converted into glucose. However, I must say that this is very bad to use. We should try to avoid using our protein if possible. This is only used normally if we go for ultra endurance events that last for 6 to 9 hours, events going into 12 hours. When we run out of carbohydrate, it stops using fat, it will then go protein. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, so we have a table now to combine the three systems, just to show you. Now, the three energy systems are ATP-PC, anaerobic glycolysis, and your oxidative phosphorylation or your aerobic system. Most of the time, you need to understand 3 systems run concurrently. We cannot say that only one system runs. What I need to emphasize here that the easiest and the quickest one is ATP-PC. Anaerobic glycolysis takes a little more time. Oxidative phosphorylation takes the longest time to start. But all 3 systems will run together. If your intensity, if your activity starts very quickly, but very high intensity, very short duration, it will mostly be using ATP PCR to produce the ATP. If your energy, if your activity is high intensity, but it takes the duration maybe up to 90 seconds, you will use mostly anaerobic glycolysis. But ATP-PC will also be used at the beginning, right? The oxidative phosphorylation takes the longest time to start, but it will start functioning roughly about 30 seconds, right? And it will contribute to whatever activities is being performed by you. But it's the slower starter and it gives you the most ATP, right? Please understand this. It's not finish one, then go to the second, then go to the third. All 3 systems will be there. All 3 systems function according to high intensity or low intensity, right? And which is most available. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Now, how do these 3 systems work? They work together. Like I said, although each energy system, I discuss it separately, it doesn't mean that only one energy system can function at a time. Each energy system is used constantly during exercise. All 3 systems are there. All 3 systems operate at the same time, but one energy system will be dominant. It will be more used. What does it depend on? It depends on intensity. That means how fast you move, and it depends on duration, how long you move. All right? So these 2 variables, intensity and duration, are going to be the main factors that decide which of the 3 systems is dominant. And today, since we are looking at aerobic training and resistance training, I need you to understand it is not the type of training that will make one system more dominant. It is, but it depends. During that activity, aerobic activity, you can also run fast. Resistance training, you can also do it fast. All right? So whatever activity or training you are doing, it is important to look at intensity and duration. Okay? All right, let's move on from there. Next slide, please. Okay, now, just for a little while, as I was saying, I just like to check for understanding, yeah? So don't worry too much about the small processes involved in physiology. Those you will learn again during your anatomy and physiology class. What you just need to know is that muscles contract to make movement. It doesn't matter whether you're doing aerobic training or you're doing resistance training, you need to have your muscles contracting. When your muscles contracting, they use ATP. The moment they use ATP, ATP is broken down into ADP and phosphate. You need to combine them together to give you more ATP. To give you more ATP, to combine ADP with P, you need 3 energy systems: ATP-PC, anaerobic glycolysis, and oxidative phosphorylation. These 3 systems combine to give you more ATP. But ATP-PC gives you ATP very quickly, but it only gives you one. Anaerobic glycolysis takes a little more time to give you ATP. They give you 4 ATP, but it takes a little more time. Oxidative phosphorylation gives you the most number of ATP, 36 to 39, but it takes the longest time to start functioning. Okay, so I'm checking for understanding here. I need to understand this. Now, when ATP is formed using with the use of oxygen, it happens inside the mitochondria, okay, under the oxidative phosphorylation system. But in order to do this system, the intensity of movement is slower. Unlike ATP and anaerobic glycolysis, where you can get ATP formed with the high intensity of exercise. ATP formed using oxygen, using the aerobic system, has lower intensity and it uses glycogen and fat, more fat. But ATP-PC system uses phosphocreatine. Anaerobic glycolysis uses glycogen, right? That's the difference. So this is number 4 there. We will say ATP formed without using oxygen happens outside the mitochondria, uses anaerobic glycolysis. However, you get lactic acid as you form the ATP. So when you move at very high intensities during anaerobic glycolysis, during anaerobic training, you have to learn to move to tolerate lactic acid. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So now, we have given you a general understanding of the energy system, how many ATP it produces, and it produces ATP anaerobically, but it tends to give you lactic acid. But when it gives you aerobically ATP, you cannot produce it at high intensities, but it gives you many ATP. Okay? So let's now look at the actual muscle fiber. You had look at muscle fibers. Do not think that muscle fibers are the same. The picture earlier on from the video, you are thinking that muscle fibers are the same. They're not. Muscle fibers within each muscle fiber bundle inside, let's say your bicep, you have a few types of muscle fibers there. Muscle fibers are different length. They can be from less than 1 centimeter to more than 35 centimeters. The very long muscle fibers are at your thighs. Most of the other short muscle fibers are throughout the rest of your body. Skeletal muscles have 3 types. You have type 1 muscles, type 2A muscles, or type 2X muscles. Type 2X, some books used to call them type 2B. All right? All these muscles can be found within the same muscle group. So inside, say, your biceps, you have both. You have all 3 types. You have type 1, type 2, type 2X. But the muscles that perform, that tend to perform posture holding, like your core muscles, your soleus, they help you stand for a very long time. They tend to have more type 1 muscles. The muscles that help you perform powerful actions, those groups tend to have more type 2 muscles, right? So we need to look at the understanding of the different types of muscles. So inside each muscle group, you have type 1 muscles. They are also known as slow oxidative muscles. SO, slow oxidative. Now, type 1 muscle rely primarily on oxidative phosphorylation to get ATP. So now when you have a type 1 muscle, they will reform ATP, but they rely primarily on your aerobic system or the oxidative phosphorylation for ATP. And type 1 muscle, they are very good for endurance. They can contract repeatedly without being tired. So example, type 1 muscles. But not only that, they also have type 2, but they predominantly have type 1 muscle, right? Then you have the second type of muscle fiber, which is the type 2A muscles. Type 2A are also called fast oxidative glycolytic, FOG. Now, type 2, they're very interesting. They have a bit of characteristics that are like type 1. That means they have endurance. They can carry on for a long time, but they also have some characteristics of type 2X fibers. Now let's go on to fiber type 2X. Type 2X, they are called fast glycolytic, FG. They can give you a lot of force, but they get tired very fast. They have limited endurance because they rely heavily on anaerobic glycolysis and your ATP-PC to get ATP. An example of this is your gastrocnemius. Now, your soleus is actually just underneath your gastroc. These two muscles are both in your calf muscle. It's really strange, all right? So you have your gastroc sitting on top, which has many type 2X muscle fibers, ready to help you jump. You have the soleus muscles at the bottom, which is predominantly type 1, and they help you carry on walking or standing for a long time. So you can see the combination of the two will allow you to jump. So when you jump, you will use mostly your gastroc muscles, but when you keep walking for a long time or stand, you'll be using your soleus, okay? The type 2 muscles, type 2A muscles, FOG muscles, is in between type 1 and type 2. They can produce force, but they can also have a lot of endurance, like type 1, okay? So now recent research are giving us evidence now there are other types of muscle. That means you have those that are like between type 1, combination of type 1 and type 2, combination of type 2 and 2X, and we call them hybrid. We're still not sure how they function and how they, whether they started off as type 1 and then became type 2A, or they started off as 2X and then became type 2A. We need more research for this, but they are now called hybrid fiber types. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a table normally explains things much clearer. So now you have your slow twitch, type 1. This is type 1, slow twitch. This is type 1, slow oxidative. Fast twitch, there are two types. Fast oxidative glycolytic, FOG, is type 2A. Fast glycolytic, FG, is type 2X. Right? So you can see in most muscles, if we look at the entire body, in your entire body, we are mostly type 1, slow twitch. 50% throughout our entire body is 50%, type 1. FOG, we are about 35%. Type 2A, 35%. Type 2X, 15%. Right? Now, what's the difference between this? We look at these characteristics. How fast do they contract? Slow twitch, type 1, contracts slower at 0.12 seconds. The amount of time to peak tension, that is the amount of time taken to contract. You can see it's quite slow to peak tension. So this is considered slow. For fast type 2A, it contracts fast, 0.8 seconds to peak tension. Type 2X is also fast, 0.8 seconds to peak tension. So if you look at this, type 1 is slow contract, it contracts slowly. Type 2G is fast, it contracts quickly, 2X. But type 2A is just like 2X, it contracts quickly, okay? How fast, how hard, how much force can it contract? Type 1, not very forcefully. both the type 2 forcefully. The size of the muscle fiber, you can see, slow twitch of type 1 muscle, they are small. That's why they cannot give you a lot of force, because their muscle fiber is small. Small muscle fiber gives you small force, right? But type 2A and type 2X are large. When they are large, they produce higher force. Okay? Fatigability means how fast do they fatigue? Type 2A can carry on for a long time. Type 1 can carry on for a long time. Type 2A, FOG, they can carry on for quite a long time, but not as long as type 1. Type 2X, FG, it gets tired very, very easily. Okay? So now here we have the aerobic capacity, meaning that they have a lot of mitochondria, they have a lot of oxygen, they have a lot of capillary. These two are linked. Aerobic capacity and capillary density are linked. Capillary density means that it can bring a lot of blood in. With a lot of blood in comes a lot of oxygen, right? So these two are linked. So if you look at type 1, aerobic capacity, very high. Capillary density, also very high. So these two will be what is being utilized when we do aerobic energy system training. However, if you look at the third one, it is very low in anaerobic capacity training, right? So it's high in aerobic capacity because it allows you not to get tired so fast. Okay, so it is low in anaerobic capacity. It doesn't allow you to produce a lot of force. The force is here. If you look at force of contraction, it is low. And so low force contraction, low anaerobic capacity. Okay, let's move on to both of these fast twitch fiber. Type 2A, it is medium aerobic capacity. It allows endurance. It allows endurance because it also has high capillary density. But in terms of anaerobic capacity, that means can it produce force? It can, but it doesn't allow as much anaerobic enzymes as fast twitch fiber X. So it doesn't contract as powerfully, right? But it can carry on for endurance training for quite a while. Now, so if we go on to type 2X, it gets tired easily because its aerobic capacity is very low. Its capillary density, the amount of capillary bringing blood, is also low. However, anaerobic capacity, it can produce force. It has anaerobic enzymes, all right, to produce ATP with the anaerobic enzymes very, very quickly, right? So if I use this table, what I'm trying to tell you is type 1 fibers will be very good if you are doing some training that uses the aerobic energy system for endurance, right? But it will not produce a lot of force. But if you use type 2, especially type 2X, they do not have endurance. So for long endurance training, we don't use the anaerobic system, but they can give you a lot of force. So thinking about this now, try to put this in place for aerobic training and resistance training. Now, when you do resistance training, if you are lifting high, heavy loads, you are not likely to be able to do it for many repetitions. So you will be using a lot of fast twitch fibers, producing a lot of force with very few repetitions. But if you use resistance training with very low loads and many, many repetitions, you can actually do aerobic energy system. So let's not try to differentiate aerobic training with resistance trainings, but rather look at, are we using the aerobic energy system or the anaerobic energy system? Are we producing repetitions for endurance, or are we producing force for a short period of time? Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. So just to carry on from there, if you look at now the fast glycolytic, why did I say that they are powerful? They are powerful because each motor unit has got many fibers, and each fiber is large. Type 2, remember? Type 2 fibers are large. Type 2X fibers are large. If you look at the medium one, FOG, they are still large, but they do not have so many fibers as compared to FG, type 2X. Finally, on your right side, look at type 1, slow oxidative. They have very few muscle fibers in one motor neuron, and the muscle fibers are small. So that is why if we look at the graphs below, the graphs tell you how much force can be produced in grams. All right. So if you try to push against resistance, you're going to see the slow twitch push very little. But the fast twitch A, they get a decent, they can produce force. And then, but look at fast twitch X, they can produce the highest amount of force. But if we look at fatigability, endurance, right at the bottom, you're going to look at fast twitch, slow twitch, or slow oxidative fibers. They are able to carry on for a long time, fatigue resistant. All right. Type 2A is not too bad. They can carry on, but not as long as the slow twitch muscles. But the fast twitch X, they get fatigue very easily, right? But if you look at the arrow in the middle, look at the arrow in the middle. No matter what we do, we always use, you will always call up, we call it recruitment, you will always recruit slow twitch muscles first. So whether you lift, when you lift a small weight, you will not need so many muscle fibers, you will still call up your slow twitch muscles first. Slow twitch muscles, and then you will call up the fast twitch A, and then only you will call up fast twitch B, right? So if you look at that, no matter what activity we do, the slow twitch muscles or type 1 muscles will always be recruited first, right? The second recruitment will be your type 2A, and the third recruitment will be your type 2X, okay? Next slide, please. Yeah, so now I have actually already used the graph earlier to tell you, how do you call muscle fibers? We call this fiber recruitment. Motor unit recruitment. One motor unit is one motor neuron plus all the fibers that are linked to it. When we call up a motor unit, it depends on what are we lifting? What exercise are we doing? Do we call it a light intensity exercise, a high intensity exercise, or even higher, very high intensity exercise, right? Light intensity would be like lifting up your pen, lifting it many, many times. If your body is considered light, not very heavy, a slow walk is light intensity exercise because your muscle contractions are not contracting very heavily, very forcefully, okay? Now, I walk faster. I jump faster. I jump a little bit, not too high. Or I lift a weight that's not too high, okay? A very high intensity exercise is when my muscles have to contract very high, like I jump, I lift my body and jump many, many times. Or I sprint very, very fast. Or I squat down to lift a very heavy load, okay? This is how I differentiate intensity. So when we do something really easy, most of the time, we call the type 1 motor units, mostly. But when we do something with higher intensity, we will call type 1 and type 2A. But when we do something very, very high intensity, we will call type 1, type 2A, type 2X. So if you look at this, type 1 motor units are always firing. Always firing means that they are always contracting, no matter what the intensity is. Smaller units are always activated fast. Larger motor units are always activated depending on how heavy the loads above are. All right? So calling smaller to larger motor units depending on intensity, we call it Henman's size principle. The smaller motor units are always activated first. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a picture to show you what I mean. So if you run slow, it's slow intensity. We only need type 1 muscles mostly. Okay, but when we run a little faster, okay, we start calling up more muscle fibers. We call up type 1 and type 2, type 2A. But once we start running faster, the highest intensity, we will always call type 1, type 2, and type 2. Type 2B is type 2X, yeah? Okay, so this picture, we can equate with the picture on the right, the figure on the right. See, if we lift a very light plate, even though you're doing resistance training, but you're calling type 1 because it's very light. It's something that's so light for this person, okay? But we lift a little heavier, we will call up type 1 and type 2A. But when we lift something really super heavy, we will lift type 1, type 2A, and type 2X. So if we look at this, I want to remind you again, you can be doing resistance training, or you can be doing aerobic system, energy system training. As long as it's easy for you, you are calling up type 1 fibers, right? But the moment it becomes a bit heavier, you will call up type 1 and type 2A. Whether it's aerobic, whether it's running, endurance type, cyclic activities, we call it, running, swimming, cycling, or whether you're doing resistance training, it depends on intensity. It doesn't depend on what type of training you're doing, okay? So it's intensity that decides the muscle fiber. Thank you, next slide. Okay, now, just now, I had a picture of one motor neuron. A motor neuron, one motor unit, is a neuron plus all the nerves that it has. So you have one neuron. If it has 100 branches, it will touch 100 fibers. A motor unit is the motor neuron plus all the muscles that is connected to it. So when you have a signal from your brain, and the signal is strong enough, if it's strong enough to stimulate that neuron, you will call all the motor fibers, all the fibers that is linked inside that motor unit. You cannot say that I have one motor neuron, I am linked to 100 fibers. If the signal is strong, I only call 50. No, it doesn't. If the signal goes to the neuron, is strong enough, all 100 fibers will contract. Okay, that whole motor unit will contract. So if the signal is strong, and it needs, if the signal comes from the brain, and the brain tells you, I need to lift one weight plate. One weight plate, it will call 4 motor units. Each motor unit will call all 100 fibers. Okay, but if the thing is heavier, it will call 10 motor units. And if each motor unit has 100 fibers, the entire motor unit will contract. So it is how many motor units is called. But when the entire motor unit contracts, all 100 fibers will contract. Okay, So how many motor units is called? It depends on how strong the signal is. But within each motor unit, all the fibers that's linked to that motor unit will contract, right? So if the signal gets stronger and stronger, or you get more and more tired, the brain will call up more and more units. But once everybody is tired, with fatigue, when you start getting tired, the force output will stop. So more and more units will call up, so that even though, let's say now, at the beginning, you're not tired, you call up 4 motor units. As you get tired, you will call 6 motor units. As you fatigue, you will call 10 motor units, right? But the force that's produced may not get stronger and stronger, because the first 4 motor units have started to become tired. So when they are tired, the brain calls other motor units, but the force is still the same, right? So this is called the all or none principle. All or none is for each motor unit. When the brain calls up motor unit A, and motor unit A has 100 fibers, all 100 fibers inside that motor unit will contract. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so now, as we move along, now I think the way I emphasize, I hope you understand that when we perform any physical movement, it requires your muscles to contract. And your muscles will contract according to motor units. Every time most muscles contract, they use ATP. And when they use ATP, ATP becomes ADP and P. They need to be recombined using 3 energy systems, right? And I told you, these 3 energy systems work together, but 2 systems work faster, with the aerobic system working the slowest. So now when we do training to improve the energy system so they can resynthesize ATP better. So physical training will improve 2 systems. They will improve your energy system fitness, and they will improve your muscular fitness. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start one by one. So now we know we have 3 ways of producing ATP. When we do energy system fitness, we want all 3 ways to improve. Okay? Improving cardiorespiratory fitness is good for us, and improving energy system fitness help us to reduce the risk for cardiovascular and metabolic disease. Training to improve the energy system, you need to train both the anaerobic and the aerobic energy system. We train both. Okay? Training both pathways can lead to improvement in your cardiorespiratory system. Do not think that if you train your aerobic system only, you can do your cardiorespiratory system. You need to train both. If you understand how the energy system works, you can see that at the beginning of training, it is anaerobic. It becomes aerobic later. But training both ways is good for your cardiorespiratory system. And to understand your energy system training, to understand how to train your energy system, we need to look at a few concepts, but I will just introduce 2 to you. One is your maximal oxygen consumption. What is the maximum amount of oxygen that can be used by your muscles? It's also known as VO2 max, right? The other thing you need to understand is your lactate threshold. Lactate threshold is your production of lactic acid. How much it produces, because once it hits a certain level, you get fatigued. You cannot carry on. But we can train these 2 systems to make our anaerobic and aerobic energy system improve so that we have better cardiorespiratory fitness. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll use a graph here. To make you understand. Now, the amount of oxygen, the maximum oxygen that you can consume doesn't mean the amount that can go into your mouth. It basically means the amount of oxygen that can be transported from your mouth down to your lungs, from your lungs into your blood, from your blood into your muscles. That amount is limited. That's why I said it needs at least 30 seconds, because you see, oxygen takes a little time before it can reach the mitochondria. All right. Now, when it reaches the mitochondria, that is what we mean by oxygen consumption. But the amount of oxygen that can go into your mitochondria can be trained. If you are not trained, your body cannot use a lot of oxygen in your mitochondria. If you are not trained, your system does not have a lot of mitochondria. Training gives you more mitochondria. Training makes your mitochondria be able to function more so that the oxygen can be used to produce ATP. This is what you need to understand. All right. So what is maximal oxygen consumption, or VO2 max? When in your muscles are utilized by the mitochondria to such a good extent that you can keep producing ATP for a very long time, you will be able to have very high VO2 max values. How do we know what is high or low? Now, how do we test it? We test it by making a person run on an ergometer. The person can also cycle on the ergometer, and we keep making the speed faster and faster. So if you can look at the graph on the right side, you will look at, this is actually a cycling test, because you look at the work rate is in watts. When you measure the work rate in watts, it means that this is a cycling test, and this person was asked to cycle faster and faster. So, and then the resistance, that means they are made to cycle harder and harder, because the bicycle flywheel there's more and more resistance on it. So this person will be cycling and cycling and using more and more oxygen. This oxygen is measured through a face mask. It's measured through a mask over the mouth, where we will measure how much oxygen is taken in, and by the time it comes out, how much oxygen and carbon dioxide comes out, so that we can estimate how much has been absorbed by your mitochondria. Okay? So basically, we will make you work, and then at the maximum, that means that when you get to a heart rate where your maximum consumption, the oxygen consumption will not go up anymore, that value is known as your maximal oxygen consumption, or your VO2 max. The fitter you are, the higher this value here will be. If you are very fit, now this person's VO2 max is 3 liters per minute, meaning that every minute he or she can only consume 3 liters, right? If you are fitter, you may be able to consume 4 liters, 5 liters, 6 liters, right? So fit people will consume more oxygen in 1 minute compared to unfit people. So what is the value of 3 liters? Let's look at the next slide. Is this person fit or not? Next slide, please. Yeah. So now we are going to look at your VO2 max score and see whether it is fit or not. Yes, on your left is for the normal population. On your right is for elite athletes. Let's look at the normal population first, okay? Now, the values given are in milliliters per kilogram per minute. Now, earlier on that graph was given in liters per minute. So basically, you are looking at 2 different values, okay? So you need to look at the earlier values did not divide it by the body weight. This has divided it by body weight. That means every kilogram body weight is using how many milliliters in 1 minute, okay? So if we look at these values, you will find that for women, I will be guessing most of you will be in the age of 20 to 29. So if you are female, and you are 20 to 29 years old, and you have a score of about 35 milliliters per kilogram per minute, you would be having very poor VO2 max, which is roughly what the person earlier did, okay? But if you have a score that is more than 49, you are probably a recreational athlete of some sort, or you could even be an athlete, all right? If we look at males, can we go down and look at a male, 20 to 29 years old, and if you have a poor score, you are less than 41 milliliters per kilogram per minute. But if you are good, you will be more than 56 for males, all right? You are more than 56 for superior, sorry, Arif, or whoever's helping me. A superior, extra, excellent, you will be more than 56. Now, but a superior category for females, same age, is only 49. Females always have lower scores than males. Why is this so? You will probably learn about this in exercise physiology, but basically, females are smaller. Females have smaller lungs, smaller hearts, and at the end of the day, no matter how you train, you will end up with smaller values, generally, for the normal population. Now, if we move to the right now, we are looking at the abnormal population. In this case, elite athletes. Athletes who train the cardiorespiratory system. They are endurance athletes. Now, these are big names. I don't know if you recognize any of those down there, but they tell you, for instance, I recognize Lance Armstrong. Can we have a look at Lance Armstrong? Many times, Tour de France cyclist. All right, look at his VO2 max score, 84. All right, then we have Sebastian Coe. Sebastian Coe used to hold the world record. All right, and he is at 77. The only female there, look at Great Walls. Great, I think her name is Great Walls. Look at her, she's the only female there. She can score 73. Now, so she's an extraordinary female, okay? So now I hope you understand the VO2 max can be improved from poor scores. If you train, you will get higher scores. This is your ability to utilize oxygen using the mitochondria, right? Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, how do we improve VO2 max? According to research, if you want to improve VO2 max, you must train at high intensities of VO2 max. 90% of VO2 max, or we can use heart rate, because heart rate is a very strong correlation with VO2 max. So that means if your maximum heart rate is 200, you train at 190 beats per minute for a duration of 35 to 45 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. This will give you the best gains, the fastest gain for VO2 max. But it's very difficult to run at high heart rates for 35 to 45 minutes. Research has also shown that lower intensities can also increase VO2 max. Maybe not as much, not as quickly, but the good news is we can run slower, we can still improve our VO2 max with a lower risk of injuries, okay? So now, we are saying that as VO2 max correlates very linearly with maximal heart rate, intensity is more easily estimated using heart rate. So we use heart rate. The American College of Sports Medicine say that if you want to train at 60% of VO2 max, you will train at 75% of your maximum heart rate. If you want to train at 80% of your VO2 max, you will be training at about 88% of your maximum heart rate. This is good for coaches This is good for coaches and fitness instructors, because then you know unfit people cannot train at very high heart rates. So if they are not very fit, you can make them train at about 70 to 75% of their maximum heart rate, and they will be training at 60% of their VO2 max. If they are slightly fitter, then you train between 80 to 90% of their maximum heart rate. You are training at 80% of their VO2 max. That is not so stressful for their heart. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so there are other ways. There are other ways that we can quantify exercise intensity. Shaki and Gaskill has a suggestion. So just now we were talking about percentage of VO2 max. But then to get percentage of VO2 max, they are using heart rate, which is much easier. So if you use heart rate, which is beats per minute, I think this is for a this is roughly for a 20-year-old person. If you are, for every 2 years older than 20, you just reduce 1% for the heart rate. Okay, so this is roughly the note that is given below. So now if we look at it, now you're about 20. So if you want to train at light intensities, train at heart rates of 90 to 120 beats per minute. That is considered light intensity. If you want to train at moderate intensities, you train between 120 to 150 beats per minute. If you want to train at high intensity, difficult work, train between 150 to 200 beats per minute. Okay. Other ways of quantifying exercise intensity are rate of perceived exertion, RPE, calories per minute. Remember, the higher intensities tend to burn higher calories. So we can use calories per minute as an exercise intensity measurement. You can also use MET. A MET is a metabolic equivalent. We look at resting MET, one MET. One MET is the amount of calories you burn when you're sitting down. So if you want to do training that is light, you train up to 4 times the caloric burn of sitting down. So that is 4 MET. But if you want to train at moderate intensity, you have to train roughly at 8 MET. And very heavy intensity, it is 12 MET. Okay, so these are all the different ways to quantify in exercise intensity, but I would just probably ask you to use heart rate and RPE. So keep the heart rate range there so that you will become fitter. So light training for you, train at 90 to 120. Moderate training, train at 120 to 150. High intensity training, train at 150 to 200. Now please understand, if you are fitter, and you train light at 90 to 120 beats per minute, you could be running quite fast. For somebody who is not fit, they are training light at 90 to 120, they could be actually walking. So you need to understand this is heart rate. So heart rate, whether you are fit or unfit, your light heart rate is here, your moderate heart rate is here, your heavy heart rate is here, your high intensity heart rate is here. But the movement velocity is different for each individual. Okay? Somebody very fit, light training will be overtaking me when they're running. Okay? But if you are not fit, you will be moving very slowly. Okay? Next slide, please. Thank you. So, it is suggested that for people who are lowly fit, low fitness, for the normal population, low fit means that your VO2 max is less than 35 milliliters per kilogram of body weight, per kilogram body weight per minute. Okay, if you are low fit, train at 60 to 70% of your maximal heart rate to improve your for aerobic training. Okay. If your medium level of fitness, that means your VO2 max is between 35 to 45 milliliters per kilogram per minute, train for your aerobic training, you can afford to train between 70 to 80% of your maximal heart rate because you can withstand more training. As you are fitter, your heart rate for aerobic training is higher. If you have high fitness levels, train with your heart rate at 75 to 90% of maximal heart rate. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Now, so that was about maximal oxygen consumption or VO2 max. I told you another point I needed to bring up with you is called the lactate threshold. Lactate, please remember, is linked to when we do higher intensity, our muscles will start producing lactate because lactic acid, because lactate was not transferred into the mitochondria. So if we go back to how we produce ATP, so first of all, we are sitting down or we are moving slowly. As long as you're sitting down and moving slowly, we have an aerobic system, but it's not producing a lot of ATP because we don't need a lot of it. Okay, when you're sitting down, you're actually utilizing the aerobic system, your oxidative system, to produce ATP, but we don't need a lot of ATP because we're sitting down. Okay, so let's say now we jump up and we start moving or we start exercising. We will start using our two anaerobic systems. When we start using the two anaerobic system, lactic acid will start forming because we will start using all the systems, but our aerobic system needs a little more push before it starts producing, before the mitochondria can start using the oxygen more effectively. So while we're waiting for it to function, there will be lactic acid that's produced. So if we keep that intensity not too high, there is some lactic acid, but not a lot. But if we keep the intensity higher and higher, we move faster and faster, there will be more lactate. And the lactate, if it doesn't get used up by the mitochondria, it is there in our muscle cells. All right? So it will get to a point where we call lactic threshold. There are two lactic thresholds. So now we need to understand what happens to lactic acid. So when lactate gets shuttled or get moved into the mitochondria, we are fine because our muscles then do not have so much lactic acid. But if we move faster, we produce more lactic acid and the mitochondria cannot keep up with reducing lactate, using up the lactate, there will be more and more lactic acid in our muscles. Okay? So under that scenario, let's try to understand, first of all, what is lactic threshold. The lactic threshold is a point at which lactic acid will go up systematically when exercise intensity goes higher and higher. Okay? This is the meaning of incremental exercise. Incremental exercise means exercise that gets faster and faster. So when exercise gets faster and faster, the intensity gets higher and higher, lactic acid from a low level where it can be maintained, it will go up. When it starts moving up, we call it a lactate threshold. Changes in lactic acid can be used to decide whether we are using the aerobic, the oxidative system to produce ATP, or are we using the anaerobic system to produce ATP? All right. So if our lactic acid, if we look at the diagram here, the graph here, once we start moving, if the cursor would like to join me now, that would be good. If the cursor moves from, if you see the beginning of this lactic line, you will see lactic acid moving at roughly 2 millimoles. Okay, if we move at this level, we are using the aerobic energy system. That means the production of lactate is being shuttled into mitochondria, and mitochondria can use oxygen to turn it to ATP. So there's not a lot of lactate. It's just above zero. It's below 2 millimoles per liter. That means in every liter of blood, there is only 2 millimoles of lactic acid. That's very little. That amount, the mitochondria can use it. So we are using the aerobic system. What lactate is being produced, it is being used. So it keeps going, but let's say we keep moving, we keep cycling, we keep running, we keep swimming, but we decide to move a little faster or a little longer. One of it is intensity, we move faster. Another of it is duration, we go longer. Because when we go longer, we tend to get a little tired. Okay, the intensity and fatigue will start setting in. Mitochondria needs to work harder. So when that happens, there's a little bit more lactic acid in our blood. It will go above 2 millimoles per liter. So that point, 2 millimoles per liter, is called the aerobic threshold. Aerobic threshold is now when we cross over from the aerobic side to start anaerobic. Once we move over 2 millimoles, there will be blood lactate going higher and higher. Right? It goes higher and higher and higher. If we run faster and faster and faster, we now move to the second point at 4 millimoles per liter, which is called the anaerobic threshold. So if the cursor now moves towards the anaerobic threshold, you will call that lactate 2. Now, what is lactate 2? LT2, lactate threshold 2, it is at roughly a certain percentage of VO2 max, and that is the part where your mitochondria and your cannot use up so much lactate. When it cannot use up so much lactate, there is more and more lactic acid in your muscles. Right? So more lactic acid in your muscles means that you will start feeling tired. It'll make you uncomfortable in your muscles. You will start becoming fatigued. For people who are not so trained, 4 millimoles, the lactate threshold 2, occurs at roughly 50 to 60% of VO2 max. So for untrained people, it happens very quickly. So when the heart rate is probably happening at about 130, 140, they are already tired. Okay, but when you are trained, it can happen with higher levels of VO2 max, much higher levels of VO2 max. Okay, so now can we move to the next slide? Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, so not this one, LT1. Thank you, LT1. Yes. Now at LT1, there is slight increase of lactate. Okay, there's slight increase. So the production of energy starts to become dominated by anaerobic, but there's still a lot of influence by aerobic. Lactic acid is produced in greater quantities than it can be cleared by the mitochondria. So there's more lactic acid because mitochondria can only clear a certain amount, but there's more and more lactic acid produced. So if you train near LT1, your heart rate becomes higher and you move faster for longer durations without increasing the lactate too much. All right. So you need to train to improve LT1. That means you train at higher heart rates. You move faster for longer durations, but try to keep the lactate around 2 millimoles per liter. Right? So you need to train at LT1 first. So we keep training at LT1 before training to improve LT2 or VO2 max. This is what we mean by training. If you understand what's LT1, LT1 is when you start producing a bit more lactic acid, but it doesn't really reach 4. It is roughly around 2 millimoles. You need to identify what is your heart rate there. If you keep training at your heart rate there, it will make you be able to endure longer and longer training and keep your LT2 further and further away from you. Training at LT1 helps you improve cardiorespiratory endurance by reducing the production of lactate. Okay, so it gives you, it helps you reduce the production of lactate because your heart rate can beat faster at LT1 for longer durations without making lactic acid move higher than 2. Okay, next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. Now, LT2 is the anaerobic threshold. This happens, this is the lowest intensity where the production of lactate exceeds the ability to utilize. That means it is going to go across 4, but not yet, right? So the production of lactate now, you keep producing more than you can remove. If you exercise above it, above LT2, you can only sustain the training for a little while, and then you will be tired, you have to stop, right? So the important thing is, what is the speed at LT2? If you can train just below LT2, you can still maintain it. You train at LT2, it will make you tolerate lactic acid for longer, right? So if you train at LT1, it will help you make your heart rate beat faster, but try to maintain lactate at a low level. So you will be able to run at faster speeds, but your lactate level will be roughly at 2 to 3. But if you train at high intensity, but just before 4, it is going to help you tolerate lactic acid in your blood and make you be able to run to remove lactate faster. Okay. However, you cannot do LT2 training for a long time. It's got to be at shorter distances, and it's got to be repeated, after giving you rest. If you train at LT1, you can train at longer distances. You still get a break, but you can also run continuously for longer periods of time. That's the difference between LT1 and LT2 training. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so now I will go back to the application of training with the understanding of the 2 lactate thresholds. So you have lactate threshold 1, which is the aerobic threshold, all right, just at 2 millimoles per kg per liter. And you have lactate threshold 2, which is at 4 millimoles per kg per liter. Per liter, sorry, no kg then. Okay. Now, if we base training on lactate 1 and lactate 2, it can help you improve both the aerobic and anaerobic energy system. First of all, to improve both of this, we mostly do large muscle activities. You can walk, you can jog, you can swim, you can cycle. These are common. But please remember, you can also do exercises such as burpees, star jump. They also use large muscle activities, and they are called resistance training. So as long as you use large muscle activities, right, you can use them to improve cardiorespiratory endurance or aerobic fitness. If you sustain this type of training, large muscle activity, sustain it just above LT1. That means train with acid, your blood lactate just above 2. It will help you improve long duration endurance. Okay. But if you train nearer LT2, nearer 4 millimoles of lactic acid in your blood, now this is high intensity. If you train 3 to 4 minutes, just near it for shorter interval, it will help you for performance lasting 15 minutes to 2 hours. Right? Next slide, please. Okay. So let's go back to the graph that I had. Okay, So I'll repeat now. So if you train near LT1, the changes that you can look out for will be changes to your slow oxidative fibers, type 1 fibers. So if you train very near LT1, you get changes in type 1 fibers, and that will help you improve fat metabolism. That means your ATP production will use both carbohydrate and also use fat. So your fat metabolism will be better. And then you can also do LT1. Now look at LT1 against heart rate. Okay. So for people who are not very trained, LT1 could occur at 125. But for people who are very trained, LT1 could occur at 150, 145. So you can still be having your heart rate beat very fast, but you do not produce a lot of lactic acid. So you train near LT1 to improve slow twitch fibers, type 1 fibers, and to improve the heart rate. So you can run faster with your heart beating faster, but you are still at LT1. Okay. Now, if you train near LT2, below LT2, it can help you improve type 2A fibers. Now, type 2A fibers can improve force, but it can also improve endurance. This type of endurance is very good for 400 to 1,500 meters, right? So it can also help you raise LT2, meaning what? Meaning that your LT2 now, if you look at the diagram, if LT2 now occurs at 155, it can help you push it to the right and make LT2 occur at 160 or 165. So that means you are pushing fatigue further away from you. So if we can make LT2 move to higher heart rate, it means that you can run faster nearer the 4 millimole lactate level. With higher heart rates, you have learned how to live with more lactate in your blood. Increasing your lactate 2 with higher heart rate can help you maintain higher speeds for longer, and really good athletes can hold steady at LT2, meaning that you have learned to be able to move at LT2, right? Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is sort of linked to the earlier one. When we learn to train at using your lactate threshold, you train to improve your lactate threshold 1. I told you just now, what we want to do is to make you fit so that 2 millimoles of lactate in your blood is at high heart rates, not low heart rate, so that you can run faster, but still your blood lactate is only 2 millimoles. The graph on the right are for untrained people. Untrained people will have 2 millimoles of lactic acid with their heart rates at 120. The graph on the left, the person reaching 2 millimoles is running at or moving at 150 beats per minute. Okay, so your LT1 actually has more room for improvement. It is easier to train LT1 to move to the right, meaning that we can train our endurance system so that our heart rate can beat faster and we can run faster or swim faster or cycle faster, but our blood lactate remains at 2 millimoles. Okay. LT2, we can train it to improve. Like I said just now, we actually maybe earlier on, our LT2, 4 millimole used to be 155. We can train it by training at 155. We can keep training just below it. If we can push it to 165, but it cannot improve as much as LT1. So basically what we want to do is to close the gap between LT1 and LT2. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's check for understanding. When you have better aerobic fitness, it will allow you to train at higher heart rate, but the lactate levels remain low. That is what I hope you understand just now. Okay, so when we train the two lactate levels, We know that lactate 1 remains at 2 millimoles. Lactate 2 will remain at 4 millimoles. These two numbers will not change. What will change is that we allow our heart rate to beat higher at 2 millimoles. Our heart rate beat higher means that actually we're running, swimming, or cycling faster. We can run, swim, cycle faster, keep the lactate at 2 millimoles, but we can do everything faster. If we keep it at 2 millimoles, means that we can keep fatigue further away from us. It's the same story for lactate 2. Lactate 2 at 4 millimoles, if we go beyond 4 millimoles, we will get tired. But we can learn to get tired at higher pace and learn to get tired slower. So if we can run and achieve 4 millimoles at higher heart rates, so which means that now, if I run at 155, 165, my heart rate is high, but I'm not near 4 millimoles yet. So this is the meaning of the last few slides of discussion. Okay, so when we keep training, sustained training means that we keep training for long endurance at LT1, right? The intensity is lower. We use large muscle activities, walk, jog, swim, cycle. But remember what I said, resistance training with things such as burpee, squat jumps, what else is there? Star jumps, all right? These can, if we do it for a long time, it can help us improve energy production through what happens? We give higher mitochondrial density. When we train at LT1, we get more mitochondria. When we have more mitochondria, our respiration, our absorption of oxygen becomes better. And the third thing, we learn how to use fat better as fuel. Okay. Now, train just below LT2 to improve your FOG. When you improve FOG, that is type 2A, you will increase your heart rate. You are able to withstand higher heart rates at LT2, which means that you can hold a steady pace at LT2 at 4 millimoles without getting tired too soon. Okay, so what you learn from there is to run shorter intervals. Don't run like long duration training. Run 3 to 4 minutes just around LT2 or above LT2 to perform, to improve performance for events lasting 15 to 2 hours or more. Train at high intensity near your anaerobic threshold so that you can tolerate lactic acid. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Now, this is our last block. This is muscular fitness, where now I will move more into resistance training. Okay, to improve muscular fitness, we will need to improve the size of your muscle, improve bone density, so that we can reduce the risk of injuries and osteoporosis. This is improving muscular fitness. Improving muscular fitness help athletes have better performance. In training terminology, we normally link muscular fitness to strength. But strength is not one thing. Strength has many components. Strength today, I will only touch on maximal strength. Maximal strength, we have absolute and relative strength. I will touch on power. I will touch on muscular endurance. All right? But there are other names, other types of strength that have been suggested by different researchers. Next slide, please. Now, under types of strength, we have maximum strength. Maximum strength is your ability to overcome very heavy loads. I show a weightlifter there. When you are able to lift a very heavy load, that one-off thing, your maximum strength there, without dividing it by your body weight, is your absolute strength. So your maximum strength, keeping it there, keeping that number is your absolute strength. But if your score for maximum strength is divided by your body weight, that will be your relative strength. Why do we differentiate? We differentiate so we can help our athletes decide what sport is suitable for them. People who use absolute strength are those that the sport, they throw or lift weights. Like for example, if you throw the short putt, javelin, what else? Hammer, all right? You are a weightlifter. All these require people to have very high absolute strength. And people with high absolute strength are normally very heavy. For example, look at our javelin thrower, short put thrower, our heavyweight bodybuilders. No, not bodybuilders, sorry, the weightlifters, heavyweight category. Okay, they are normally very big. They need to be big so they have bigger muscles. When they have bigger muscles, the implement that they throw are not so big in their terms, right? So this event need absolute scores to absolute strength to be high. Whereas people who need high relative weight means that you have a maximum strength score, but you divide it by your body weight, you are strong per kilogram. So people who need strong, good relative weight, strength are those who need to lift their body weight off the ground. If you're a high jumper, you're a long jumper, you're a gymnast, you play team sport, it is better if your body is not so heavy because you need to lift your body off the ground. Then you need to have relative strength, which is your maximum strength score divided by your body weight. Okay. The next category of strength is power. Power is the ability to move a load very quickly with velocity. Like for instance, you look at this person jumping. He's moving his body up very quickly so he can jump high. At the same time, he's moving his arm to produce the force to hit the ball very quickly. So all this is power. Power is a combination of strength and speed, right? The third type of strength is muscular endurance. Muscular endurance is the ability to contract your muscle repeatedly, many times, right? Now, I need you to link here to what we call, remember, I told you much earlier, when you're able to do something repeatedly, muscle contractions repeatedly for many times. Now, what type of energy system do we look at? And for these, they normally throw something once, lift weights once or twice, all right? Or they jump up once or twice. So what energy systems are being used here? Think about that. Think about that now, yeah? Other types of strength is power endurance, where you jump not only once, but many times. Strength endurance, you lift something heavy also many times. Next slide, please. Now, in the training of strength, we have a model suggested by the National Academy of Sports Medicine. They call it the Optimum Performance Training Model, OPT. In the training of strength, they have a hierarchy. If you look at this picture on the right, the hierarchy requires that you train stabilize your body first, then you train your strength, then you train for power. What is the meaning of stabilization? Stabilization means that you have to look for endurance. You have to do repeated endurance, repeated repetitions in stable and unstable conditions. So let's say, for instance, you're doing training of your legs, but you want to train with your leg in a stable condition and slightly not so stable condition. Once you got the form, once you got that correct, then you go for the next type of endurance, which is your muscular endurance, or we call it strength endurance, right? Then when you're done, you do hypertrophy. You make your muscles larger. Then when your muscles are larger, then only you train for maximum strength. When you have all of that, then you train for power. This is the sequence that is suggested for individuals to train for strength. Next slide, please. All right, I won't go here because I will just tell you that this is actually just a description based on the diagram just now, okay? So we will go through it in briefly. So the first part you need to train is what we call stabilization endurance. You do moderate to low, very light to very moderate loads. These are weights, light to moderate weights, but for many repetitions. And you do this in positions that challenge your stability. That's why it's called stabilization endurance. Like for instance, you may want to do a form of repetition that is first two-legged, single-legged, all right? Or you could be practicing your core endurance, but you hold a V position so that you need to be stable, all right? You want to challenge your stabilization. Controlled unstable exercises will teach you to stabilize yourself, balance yourself, and have many repetitions. That's why this is the first level of training. Now, the second level of training is just previously, but now is slightly heavier loads, still moderately heavy loads. And now you go for more repetitions, and you do many repetitions because you want to recruit type 1 fibers, and you still, because type 1 fibers are mostly around your torso area, your core area. They are responsible for holding your body steady, holding your body up in good posture, right? And if you do this type of training, you actually can start reducing fat and increasing lean body mass. Now, when these two stages are done, the third stage now, you focus on repetitions 8 to 12 RM. Heavier ones, 8 to 12 RM, because these are the repetitions where you will make your muscle fibers increase size. At the same time, 8 to 12 repetitions are given not too long rest. And you do this so that when you have enlarged fibers, you move on to stage 4, which is now to carry heavy loads to train for maximum strength. When you carry very heavy